introduce Dr. Daly.
I'm getting really nervous here because I'm actually the third string. So they told me Bruce Becker's going to give this speech, and now I just heard I'm replacing God. And then I heard this baseball player give a perfect speech, and this guy from Knoxville just tell him what a good guy he is, and now I'm kind of come here and give a speech in my Belgian English. So I'll do what I can about this. I'm very grateful to be here. I also want to say I'm not a physical therapist. I'm a statistician, kind of. And I come out of the competitive swimming world, and I moved in the 90s to much more Paralympics. I know a lot about Paralympic swimming. And about 2000, I thought, this is not the end of the world. The world's not waiting around to see if guys swim 1/10 of a second, more or less. I said, well, let's move over to this more therapeutic direction. And my, let's say, practical experience is I taught a lot of people with stroke how to swim. And I'm a swimming teacher, so I teach people how to swim. They said, you're not a therapist. Don't bother about bow bath and so forth. Teach them how to swim. I can do that. But I'm going to talk more about statistics, I'm afraid. And for some reason or another, I'll get to it, I started getting involved in this program, which we are working with the World Health Organization to increase the awareness of aquatic therapy via the World Health Organization, and we talk about the evidence base for aquatic therapy. I want to introduce myself. Actually, I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, near the Harvard Yard. After 38 years of Belgian, I can still talk the Harvard Yard. And I went to Springfield College, physical education. I swam for Coach Red Sylvia. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but I went to Penn State and I studied biomechanics under Peter Cavanaugh and Dick Nelson. And before biomechanics, anyone heard about it. And later on, actually after that, I moved to Belgium for a year. And 38 years later, I'm still there. I made a PhD about competitive swimming and the relationship between body structure, flexibility, and strength and performance. So it was a little bit the early stadium of, well, what are you going to do with a Paralympic swimmer? And I work at the Faculty of Kinesiology and Rehabilitation Science, Catholic University of Leuven, which was founded in 1425, before you guys even were born. In a few years, we'll be 600 years old. And Vesalius and Erasmus were teachers in our university. You know, Vesalius, he dug up graves to study anatomy. And we're a Catholic university, so you can figure out it's rather unpopular in those days to be digging up graves. He moved to Italy to do it, actually. And it's a really nice place in the summertime. Bruce was there in the summertime. You know, in June, it's light till 10 o'clock because we're a little bit higher up in the world. And this is the longest bar in the world, they say. In the wintertime, it's rather rainy and cold, and the sun never comes out. So, and if you don't know where Belgium is, at least you'll learn something today. It's here. And actually, I'm pretty lucky. I can go to Paris in 90 minutes, go to London in 2 hours, and go to Amsterdam in 2 hours. And you talk about going back and forth for a day. I can go down to Paris, go to the Louvre, and come back in a day. Lucky me. And since you don't know anything about Belgium, who's this guy? You have to know this guy. He's very famous. He's a Belgian, huh? This is Jacques Roga. He's the president of the International Olympic Committee. This guy, he's dead. This is Jacques Brel, a famous musician, who, and I see this baseball player sitting in the back. I'm really getting more nervous now. Sorry, in the 90s, there was no internet, so I didn't follow baseball. It's only in 2004 when the Red Sox really started getting better that I started following baseball again. And just 2 months ago, I started learning how to play golf. Imagine that. Jacques Brel is a rather famous musician. I think in Baltimore, actually, he has a show at the moment. He's not the show, but this guy, athlete, medics, the cyclist. Boy, I'm talking too hard, fast. And this guy, no one knows him. This is Paul Piot. Paul Piot was, until 6 months ago, the boss of the United Nations Action Against AIDS. He's Belgian. And who's Nicolas Colsaert? Golfer. He just beat Tiger Woods 2 months ago, 2 weeks ago in the Ryder Cup. Belgian. Save the day. And I live over here. It's just 20 minutes from Brussels. This is Bastogne, Battle of the Bulge. If you didn't know about it, you know about it now. This is frites. So, you know, French fries are not French, they're Belgian. And we eat frites with mayonnaise. So if you think this is disgusting, just think about it as yellow ketchup. And this is actually a pretty physical good stuff because the French fries are in this cone and they stay warm down there because the top is covered. So we have no fast food in Belgium, huh? Only kebab and a little bit of McDonald's, but we have frites. Okay, so now you have a first introduction. At least you learn something that you won't forget in 20 years or in 2 hours. We're going to get back to this topic about increasing awareness of aquatic therapy via the World Health Organization study about the evidence base of aquatics. And the World Health Organization, at least the European division, has a committee which is working on this guidelines for safe recreational water environment, swimming pools and similar environments. So that's actually just about the water quality and about how much chlorine you're going to put in your water and so forth and so forth. It has nothing to do with the health benefits. But Johan Lambeck, who some of you know, was invited to these meetings, and he kind of suggested, well, maybe you should go in the direction of the health benefits of water. This is also included. Not only water is healthy, you want to avoid pollution, but let's talk about the health benefits. And in 2012, they are going to revise these recreational guidelines, so maybe it's possible to add something about the health benefits of water. And indeed, the idea was to strengthen these guidelines. Oops, wrong one. This one. And we've had a few meetings with the people. And, of course, we don't want to be too pretentious. We're not going to write guidelines which are the guidelines for the rest of the life. But we're going to start to get all the evidence together with a group of people to try to start to make I would call a narrative story about what is possible. And we, at the moment, I would consider this the best information available. But you can imagine making sure you know the best information is not actually easy. And, of course, these documents are passed by the World Health Organization via their process, and also there's a kind of a legal something involved. So how did this partnership that we have involve? Well, a few years ago, actually in 2007, and Bruce was there invited too, but we didn't get our money that year. We were collaborating with 7 or 8 European universities, and we had what we call an intensive course. It's a 2-week summer course where 10, 15 students come over and they learn about how to actually analyze the evidence base for aquatic therapy. So actually they learn how to read an article. But since Lambeck is a practitioner, he taught 2 weeks. So every day they had 2 or 3 hours in the water. But in the meantime, they had the story about how to read, and the last 2 days they had to present a systematic review of articles we gave them. So we did this for about 3 years, and we'll get back to it too. So we kind of figured after 3 years, but what's the problem? Well, the problem is that Paula does a study. She uses these outcome measurements. And somebody else over there does another study. He uses a little bit different outcome measurements. So she has 10 people. They have 20 people. But you can't put them together because you're studying the same population, but the outcomes are different. So you're not sure exactly what you found. So we wanted to do this, start to talk about the critical assessment. So this group got together, and we think to work for the World Health Organization. And at the first moment, this involves to this conference, which we're making advertisement for, of course. In March, there'll be a first European Conference of Evidence-Based Aquatic Therapy in Turkey. I have some information about it if you want. It's actually sponsored also in a certain sense by the group here. I think they're sponsoring Bruce to come over. So, of course, the question is there a problem? If it's not broken, don't fix it. We're always kind of like organizing things and getting reorganized, but I'm wondering if we really need to do it because, well, we know that balneotherapy and spa therapy are common treatments for low back pain, for instance. And not in my country, but some countries, the insurance company pays you back for it. But if you really do a systematic review, you only found 5 random controlled trials which only use this visual analog scale to report about pain. And the treatment was modestly effective. Modestly. What's that? Actually, and in the British Medical Journal, they made the statement, a more important finding is the mismatch between the popularity of these interventions and the paucity of the evaluation of their efficacy. So we're all doing it, but what exactly are we doing? The patients are reporting we like it, and maybe we need some more of this kind of stuff. The patients like it, but what exactly is happening? So we want to do a systematic review of the literature of the effects of aquatic therapy on function, activity, participation in persons with chronic health problems. And you know this function, activity, and participation is the terminology of the World Health Organization, which I suppose mostly are familiar with. And in the first instance, to write a common language review, or some people say a narrative review. So we'll do a systematic review, but the report would be, in the first instance, a narrative. The topics are, at the moment, neurology led by Johan, and he's talking about stroke, Parkinson, MS. I think the girls are talking about MS, I think. No. Oh, no, sorry, that's not. There's another. I just read something about MS, but it's not here. Metabolic syndrome. Most of you know Johan Lambeck. Musculoskeletal orthopedics by Ben Waller, who's finishing his PhD. He's actually English, but working in Finland. He's following several PhDs in Finland about the let's say, the effect of water on knee problems and knee exercises. Sophie Haywood, some of you know also, she is working in Melbourne. She was designated by the Australian Aquatic Therapy Association to take a world trip. She traveled 6 months around the world and visit everybody who is anybody about this business. And she actually is a physiotherapist for an Australian football team. This is a combination of American football and rugby. So it's actually American football without helmets. So you can imagine it's a little bit dangerous business. So they're rather well. And Ben, if you know something about low back pain, a few years ago in clinical rehabilitation, we wrote a review about low back pain and aquatic therapy in clinical rehabilitation. French and Hungarian guys writing about balneology. Cardio from Bruce. Paula for women's health. Again, sport, Sophie and Ben. I know something about geriatrics and elderly because it's my close future. Back to the future. Pediatrics with Xavi in Spain, who's finishing his PhD about core measurements for pediatric aquatic therapy. And my student Marlies, who is working in Edinburgh actually. And immersion. We decided also that it would be a good idea to have a separate chapter about immersion, and there'll be a separate chapter about the system or the method. We don't do mental health and no skin problems at the moment, and we're not going to talk about the mineral content of water comparing the Black Forest to the west coast of Spain. It's too much problem. Some water here. So I think some people are familiar with this, some not. If you're familiar, let's say, be calm, otherwise. So first thing you want to do is find the literature. And you need to search these databases. And I think most people know what PubMed is and what Google Scholar is. Who knows Cochrane? Raise your hand, you know Cochrane. Half of the people know Cochrane, so the other half, you learn something new. Cochrane Collaboration is actually a commercial company who solicits systematic reviewing. And if you go to the Cochrane website, you'll find any review about what's happening. So before you start to do a review, go to Cochrane to make sure somebody didn't do it already. And sometimes you have to pay, sometimes it's free. Since I'm in university, all this is free, so it's for me not so easy to figure out what people have to pay for. Sorry. Sinal, what's that? Who knows that one? Specifically for nurses, huh? It's rather... So it's a pretty good business. Sport discus, you know what? Why do you use sport discus? There's no RCTs in sport discus, huh? But there's Sports Illustrated and all those kind of books which tell you everything about what's popular at the moment. So it's not so bad idea to do it. Web of Science. What's the advantage of Web of Science? Students, what's the advantage of Web of Science? If I have an article in 2009, I can go to the Web of Science and see who in 2010 referred to that article in 2009. So I can look in the good direction. If I really want to find everything, I can look at an article 2006, who referred to this article in the meantime. So I find new articles. It's just a strategy, huh? And you see, direct author contact. If you have abstracts and that kind of stuff, pick up the telephone and call them up. Huh? Sometimes it's not published yet, sometimes it's someplace or another. And actually, email, no one answers the email anymore. Huh? Go back to the telephone. We did something about burns. We just called up Galveston. We found everything about burns. And most people are pretty open about their results, because if you call me up and say, oh, Mr. Daly, can I have your results? Oh, somebody called me up. I must be famous. So I'll give you my results. Professors are ego trippers, huh? University's upside-down pyramid, you know. A lot of bosses and no workers. We studied all kinds. I didn't say that. All kinds of studies. So we'll get back to that. All kinds of studies. Sometimes you talk about random controlled trials. Limits, at the moment, it's not relevant because of the pediatrics. Active, passive, we talk about. We don't worry about mineral content and that kind of, let's say, immersion. So you know the system 2 about the words. So important about the words. If we do something, the principle is, if you do it, you should find the same thing. That's principle. That's principle of any scientific endeavor. You should publish an article. It should be transparent enough that somebody else does the same thing. So this is systematic. These are all the words you can use. And, or. There's ways to do it in internet so you can keep track of what exactly you did. And that's the big problem. Students think, when am I finished? And after when, they said to the guy to the PubMed, next day, oh, I found a big list. I said, yeah, am I finished? No, go back, try it again. Find the same thing next day. And 3 months later, he's back and he found everything. But this is not a work you do in one day. Yeah? This is for people who can sit down at 8 o'clock in the morning and get back up at 8 o'clock at night. If you have, after 2 minutes, have to get up and go to the bathroom, forget it. You can't work in this business. So you really need to do it. And if you use all these words, and most people do it, at the moment you see it's more and more popular, you need to have a story. And this is the story in the case of pediatrics. If we use all these words, or the words for pediatrics specifically, we found 511 articles. That's a lot. We've got to read all those? Well, if we just read the article, the title, and the abstract, we can eliminate 444 already. So we had 67 here, but we had the full text of 55, and we had 12 articles we found by searching the reference lists. Another strategy. Call up the author, take your articles, look at the reference list. Who do they refer to? Then you find the rest. And if you publish an article, the editor will send your article back, well, tell me, did you call up people? Did you do this? Did you do that? Just looking in the web is not enough. So you really need to find everything. And okay, then we're going to exclude a certain amount of things: temporary respiratory illness, policy statements, healthy children. We didn't include in pediatrics. So we had 63 over with all kinds of study designs. This is not only RCTs, cohort studies, and so forth and so forth. We'll get back to that one. Some of these studies had no actual intervention, so if it's a systematic review already, we include it, even though there's no intervention associated to that one. But this is a strategy which I report back, so you could see what I did, and if you had to do it the same thing, you would find the same thing. I should expect it. And if you want to work with a health organization, you better figure out is the real thing you're doing. Sorry, wrong thing again. Looks a little bit complicated. I want to do it just to look at this part. So we had in this pediatrics business several groups of populations, let's say. Nervous system, let's say the CP children. Mental behavioral disorders. Excuse me if I'm using the wrong political terminology. I'm European, so you can excuse me. This is autism mostly, autism spectrum syndrome mostly. Internal medicine, not sure. Musculoskeletal, it's obvious. So you see, for CP, actually children, the most studies here, and autism also a lot of studies. But what kind of studies do we see? Meta-analysis. Who knows what meta-analysis is? Hold on. A few people know what it is. We'll try it again. Systematic reviews, RCTs, random controlled trials, non-RCTs, case control, cross-sectional studies. So there's different kinds of studies you can look at. Normally this RCT is the gold standard. All the rest is secondary. But in general, as compared to a few years ago, people said, oh, systematic review is only RCT. So in general, people go more and more back. We're going to use the RCTs, we're going to analyze these, and we're going to see if the rest supports or doesn't support RCTs. So if you really look at the literature, the gold standard is RCT, but normally we look about a little bit farther. If we look at the numbers down here, there are RCTs and case studies, or case series studies are the most here. Polos crossover, in this case, would be an RCT in our structure. Well, what do they measure? They measure function. My clock here. Function, activity, participation. And we see that function and activity are most measured. Participation could be, do I go to the store? Do I take part in daily living? So, in fact, most people don't ask it too much. They really look at function and activity, 10-meter walking, but how much do I take part in daily living? A little bit less. Personal factors less. Okay. So we know this mostly in the nervous system, in the mental health system. We know that function activity is looked at mostly, and I know nobody can read this except the front row. But what I want to do here is, this is an overview of some of the studies, and as compared to elderly, which I compare to, children studies, they work individually. Elderly studies, they work in groups. That's one important thing. Secondly, the average number of participants with the control group included is 10.7. But be careful, there's 49 here, but 23, 12, 22, 7, 21, and there's a few with 7, 7, 7, 6. So the studies are relatively small. So I'm really glad to hear about this multi-center study. If we don't move to multi-center studies with fixed core measurement tools, in the future we won't be able to, let's say, prove what we're doing is correct. Be careful, as a scientist, you have a hypothesis and you want to see if it's correct or not. You're not going to prove that my system is good, hopefully. Another important thing, intensity. Nobody reports it. So if you read a study, and this is a problem for practitioners, read a scientific study, you have no clue what they did. You can't repeat the study because you don't know the intensity, for instance. What else is here? Temperature of the water only reported 37% of the time. Depth, also not. So it's pretty difficult to figure out what exactly is happening. Temperature, of course, is in real numbers, centigrade, and not this Fahrenheit business, which you people use. Get with the world, I'd say. And for elderly, before 2009, we did it, and we had 114 studies until 2009, and we reduced it to 19, but this is only RCTs. This is Pierre, world famous in Belgium. He's 80 years old in the meantime, had a stroke 10 years ago, swims twice a week, and rides with his three-wheeler on our flat country, 70 kilometers in the summertime on some afternoons. He's coming all the time. So if we look at these 19 studies, we saw before 2009, 9 studies about healthy people. In the meantime, and that's the distinction, this is before 2009 and it's now in 2009. So since 2009, there's 6 studies about healthy population of elderly people. And elderly people, the definition was, the studies were I'm wondering if the slide didn't get skipped over. Average age, no less than 55, and nobody under 50 years included. But in general, it's higher. Well, be careful, huh? They have these deep water running studies about low back pain, that they have people from 70 until 40, and you're going to use it or not. Yeah. Only one study about stroke in Vancouver, I think. 4 before, 4 later about arthritis and general stuff, rheumatism, osteoporosis, heart disease, only one in the meantime, COPD, and in the meantime, 1 study about Parkinson. And you see in elderly, we're combining some, let's say, disability diseases, I would say, in this study. So, of course, there's overlap between what elderly is happening and what otherwise. Elderly, yeah, I hear it coming from our bosses. Yeah, but the European Commission, they have a lot of money for elderly. Yeah? So you have to change your topic and go to elderly because you get money. Dangerous about academic life. You have to follow the mode to get your money. It's not really conducive to intellectual work, but sometimes. In any case, you see, since 2009, there's more and more studies about elderly. And these are all RCTs. What do they study? What do they use? This is not all the 19, and this is before 2009. But people are interested. You see VO2 peak, VO2 max. This is rather well used. Some pain, depending if you call pain function or not. And some strength measurements. WOMAC pain, pain visual analog scale, one-time range of motion. And same studies, again, also at the same time using 6-minute walking, gait speed, 10-meter walking. 6-minute walking is rather popular. There's a question about what exactly is 6-minute walking. We'll get back to it later. Is 6-minute walking a reflection of aerobic capacity or not? Or is it local muscle strength? I heard from the study, I think it sounds like local muscle strength in your case, and maybe not exactly a reflection of cardiovascular fitness. But in our place, in my faculty, the dean is a big guy in COPD, lung function. I mean big guy, he means he's publishing 20 articles a year. This is the top of the world. And they had some studies in COPD people. 6-minute walking time is a good reflection of aerobic capacity, but maybe not in other populations. Another message here, I heard it here too. We think that these simple clinical tests are rather interesting because they're motivational. It's not exactly scientific, but if you get guys over the swimming pool, and be careful, the world's not waiting for better swimmers. The world's waiting for people who can walk better in 6 minutes. So if you do a study and you only study in the water test, forget it. Huh? You have to study. You have to do some outcome measures, see if they function better on dry land. Otherwise, you won't be able to sell your business. And these 10-minute walking tests, 10 meter, it's rather simple. You can do it often. When we did a stroke study, they come Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday to swim. On Tuesday, they came in, they got dressed, and in the pool, we had 10 meters. And they walked 10 meters before they swam. They lost, 30 seconds. We did it every week. It's motivational. A little bit dangerous, but... And the other point is this learning effect. To be careful, you have to get rid of the learning effect. Because a typical example is in these kind of tests like the long jump, Olympic Games, long jump, yeah. The range between the worst and the best performance of an individual in 1 hour is more than a half a meter. And so the individual fluctuation in 10-meter walking time without any kind of intervention is also rather high. So you have to be careful if you find something, if what you find is better than just if you didn't do anything but just practiced a lot on the test. A little bit statistical background and clinical relevance. Who knows clinical relevance? 10 meters of walking is a famous story. Huh? Clinical relevance. We're all busy with the 0.5 level. Statistics, power. We need it. But what's clinically relevant? How fast you need to walk to cross the street before the light changes. 10 meters in 10 seconds. 1 meter a second. So, clinical relevance is I want to get a guy or a girl in the water to function better on dry land until they can walk across the street before the light changes and don't get killed. Look at my clock. I'm going to be quick. Who knows Pedro scale? How do you know that this RCT is really what it's supposed to be? What's the methodological quality of an RCT, of a test? And this is what learning to read is. Students should know it from the beginning. They don't know it. So we ask these simple questions, and we rank the articles according to these questions about the methodological quality. Are they randomized? If it's an RCT, it should be randomized, but be careful. Concealed allocation. Who pulled the numbers out of the hat to put them in two groups? Equal a baseline. Some people say forget it. Equal a baseline means the two groups were equal at the beginning point. What's the, students, what's the catch-22 of equal a baseline? Contradictory, If I have a random allocation, the two groups are by definition equal at baseline, depending on the number. If I have 300 people and I put them in two random groups, they should be equal. If I have 10 people, maybe not. Eligibility specified. We hit it. Blind assessors. Who did the test? Do they know which group the people are in? So you can imagine if you see Paula's study, this is not just one person. This is a whole team to do this. You need to ask these questions to figure out what's happening. Blind caregivers. She's not blinded. She was a caregiver and she's running the study. She's not a blind caregiver. Find somebody who doesn't know who's in the group and let them do it. Blinded participants. Mostly they know. Point estimations and variability are the numbers in the article. It's unbelievable, especially in pediatrics, how many articles only give figures and don't give any numbers. Oh, they improved. How much? Yeah, can't figure it out. It's only in a graph. It's for me frustrating. Intention to treat. Who knows what intention to treat is? Yeah, Paul, you know everything. What's intention to treat? What do you do with the dropouts? You start a study. I said this morning. And you have an intervention, and you teach these 15 people how to swim. Then there are 10 people that swim really great, and 5 other people dropped out. Why did they drop out? Yeah, because they didn't like it. So you take these 10 people, oh, they got much better. My study is fantastic. They improved 100%. Yeah, but 5 people dropped out, So this intention to treat is beforehand, what are you going to do with the dropouts? And before I forget it, one of the supposed, at least the general perception of aquatic therapy, and it's pretty well staffed here, based, that dry land treatment in general isn't worse, or aquatic therapy isn't better than dry land treatment, but the adherence is better. People like it better. And they keep coming back. And I asked Paula, did you do an economic study of your 2 treatments? The problem is, what's the price? The price, swimming pools are expensive. In our country, they say, oh, swimming's too expensive. So we have this Delphi score, pediatric score of these articles here, and we rank them. So some people would say, these studies are too low. We're only going to take these other ones, and we're going to base the evidence on these high methodological quality. And we'll see if the other evidence supports it. Here we go. And this is going to be 5 more minutes. Okay. My intention was indeed to give you more about the system than to give you about the results. If you read the results, you can look at the slides. I figure you can read. I'm always amazed about doctors. Doctors come in, they ask you questions. They say, how do you feel? I said, didn't you read my papers? Why do you have to ask me again? 5 people asked me already. So we have between 12 and 139 people in these studies. Big diversity. 58 to 78 years. 4 to 24 weeks. How long is the intervention should be? What's a good intervention? How long should it be? 1 to 3 sessions a week. In our country, nobody will come more than twice a week. Too much traffic. Yeah, but they come. You can have them come 3 times a week for 6 to 8 weeks. After that, they stop. 2 times a week, they'll come year in, year out. Total treatment time. So if you want to summarize the evidence, you're already in big trouble because look how many people are here and how many times. So there's a big diversity in the evidence. Water level, wasted chest depth, temperature 25 to 35. 25 is an extreme value. Normally 28, 29, 30, 31. I don't even know what that is in your business. Less than 50% of the people did follow-up. So if I do a study, I want to know if I give the treatment, is the problem solved? Or do I have to keep giving the treatment? If I stop the treatment and people get worse again, not so bad. That's why I asked about the washout. So if people, how are you going to figure out if your treatment kept its advantage?
What do you feel is the optimum follow-up?
Normally ask a statistician, but at least a half of the treatment time. Huh? So we had pediatric work, 10 weeks intervention, and the follow-up was after 5 weeks.
Did you follow it up again after that?
Well, this was a crossover too, so after 10 weeks, the washout was 5 weeks. We did a follow-up, and that was the follow-up was the baseline of the cessation of the study. The rule of thumb in our place is often 6 weeks. The therapy guys use a lot of treatments of 6 weeks, but any kind of fitness-directed study has to be 10 weeks, I think. Question is, so if we look at our semester is 13 weeks, we have students who work in the semester, we have to be in this 13-week time, so we did the study. The study has to start, people have to go, Christmas vacation have to come, and you kind of calculate your follow-up according to Christmas vacation, that kind of stuff. So it's a pragmatic thing. I have no magic formula for the follow-up. If your treatment is a year, well, that's another. If you want to publish about low back pain, I don't publish about low back pain too much, but if you don't have a follow-up of at least 1 year later, you won't get in a good journal anymore. Good journal means impact factor 1.5, 2, if you know what that is. I'm not going to explain this. I want to talk about meta-analysis, what exactly it is. It's possible to combine results. There's some programs that you can do statistics, and you can combine 2 or 3 studies to figure out what the result is. Here we see, and I'll just show this one, I'll skip the rest, that aerobic capacity, the only 2 studies that use the same outcome measurement or the same outcome report was Broman and Tokushima. And this is their starting point was 0, and this is 1 standard deviation increase. They both found an increase, and if you combine these 2 studies based on the amount of people, 15, 9, 15 in the control group, the general improvement will be about 0.62 standard deviations. That means they improved about 25% compared to the population. And important here is that nobody got worse. So you can do some of this kind of, I call it statistical monkey business. It isn't monkey business, but it doesn't take too much long. But you can combine studies, but it's important they use the same outcomes. So we had 19 studies, but we can only put twice here. So another guy, Hinman, I think, also did, or a girl maybe? It's a girl. She did also cardiovascular fitness. She only reported milliliter per kilogram. And these guys reported liter. So we couldn't combine. But they also found increase in aerobic capacity. The same to Hinman here. I'm going to skip it. But this was a little bit the idea. In this case, that 6-minute walking time wasn't necessarily a good review of this. I'm going to go just about this pediatrics, and I'll go one about elderly, then we'll finish up. Pediatrics, we didn't report about it too much, but it's really diverse populations. A lot of people know people. Most evidence for nervous system and intellectual behavioral disorders, so there's a lot of studies about CP, a lot of studies about autism. The best studies in musculoskeletal. Functional activity is measured a lot. And this is for sure. 3 studies found that in CP children, when they swim, that they increase, especially the last 2 categories, I can't say it in my head, the gross motor function, you have a global category and 3 detailed categories. The first category of gross motor function doesn't get better, but the second 2 categories do get better in swimming. We saw it in Serbia, we saw it in Belgium, and now we saw it in 2 other literature studies. So gross motor function, you can increase it in kids with CP. There's also some benefits for asthma. This is remember that, there's only one other thing I want to show. PADI, there's a general physical therapy scales here, which got a little bit better. CP kids, they learn how to swim. And even if you stop swimming, they come back in 6 weeks, they can still swim, and they can do all kind of things that you want them to do. So swimming, children with CP, they can swim better. And in general, we saw adults get better on dry land, and they swim a little bit better. Children certainly get better in the water, but they don't reflect it on dry land because they're already active, relatively speaking. Adults, if you have a stroke, you sit in your chair and do nothing. But kids go to school with braces, wheelchairs, whatever, they're still active. But nevertheless, kids can swim for a long time. And it's really important, the message we saw this morning. Swimming is a recreational activity. It's a family activity. The only thing, if you have inclusion schools, the only thing the CP kids can do in the physical education class is swim. That's my PE teacher bias. Elderly, aerobic capacity gets better, range of motion less consistent, balance if you do specific tests. If you just swim, you won't get better in balance. You need to work on it. Body composition. And in general, we only found one thing, that nobody had really any negative experience with this aquatic therapy. This is okay, important. Bruce, this is not important. So, and since the time is up, we stop. So just summarize, you know what Belgium is, at least you know what French fries are, and you know something about the strategy we tried to use to summarize the evidence, but you can understand it's a little bit difficult to report the evidence because there's so many diverse kind of studies, it's not exactly clear. And it's a big work, we're still a work in progress. Thanks.